What's up, guys? Toad back again, as always. Live streaming early in the morning, baby. We're on a nice baseball run here after last night. Another win. I think I'm on a 5-0 baseball run over the last few days. Baseball heating up again as we hit the stretch run here. I'm trying to get back to even on the year, man. Baseball had a real bad time during the middle of the season here, but last night it was Texas Rangers got there. They were losing the game, I think 4-1 at one point after they were up 1-0. Kumar Rocker, was that his name? The Indian pitcher making his major league debut there. He didn't have a bad start, but I think he kind of started to tire and the runs started coming in for Seattle, but then we shifted over to the late game, the late game play, the bullpens, and Texas's hitting was able to get to Seattle's relief pitchers enough that they wound up winning the game 5-4. So I'm going to take it. It was basically a close game most of the way. So playing the underdog price there, plus 136, it looked good. The money moved in my direction. I think the money line seemed like it moved in my direction. So I like that. I think it was the right play to make. Let's look at today's card. I don't know how I feel about these plays, but I do think that the market is agreeing with both of my plays here, sort of. I mean, I see some kind of conflicting indicators around, but this baseball card, there isn't a whole lot that I love here necessarily. I do think that Cleveland does have a fairly big starting pitching edge there between Tanner Bibby and Zach Littell. Tanner Bibby is absolutely the better pitcher, but you see that money line coming down on Cleveland from minus 175 to minus 169. 83% of the tickets on a public Cleveland team, because everybody knows Cleveland is playoff bound and Tampa is basically not going to make the playoffs. And technically, they're not eliminated, but I think they know. But 81% of the cash is on Tampa, so I don't know exactly how I should read into that. Texas-Seattle is interesting. I always talk about, well, maybe this is going to be a good pitching matchup. This is going to be kind of crazy, man. I think there are just too many unknown factors here to really do this, but the odds makers are throwing up a low total on this one. It's 7. And I saw some 6.5s juiced to the over out there as well. Odds makers telling you they think this is going to be a low-scoring game. This is two starting pitchers returning from, I believe, either from the DL. Well, in Texas' case, it's Jacob deGrom, and he's been injured for over a year. I think he last pitched last April. So with that amount of time off, I do say I like to take veteran pitchers when they come back off of the DL, but with that much time off, I'm not quite sure that I want to get involved in it. But deGrom is coming back for Texas here, even though they are out of it. So they might get a decent start out of him because he might be pumped just to be playing baseball again, and he gets to face a division rival here. Seattle has Emerson Hancock pitching, who's a decent young pitcher of theirs, who's been out of their rotation for a bit, and I'm not entirely sure why that's the case. I don't know if he's been hurt or if they just took him out of the rotation, but his numbers this season haven't been that bad, and I believe Texas has never seen him before. So Hancock, one of those good young arms on the Seattle team, could have somewhat of an advantage over the opposing hitters just because they haven't seen him before. deGrom, coming back from injury, could be pumped up to make this start, and I do think he has decent numbers against Seattle as well. So I don't disagree with the under there. It's just, it's tough to really come in and play an under. Well, you'd have to play an under 7. That would be the better way to do it, but you're having to lay juice on that at minus 120, it looks like right now. I'm not really willing to do it, but I do think there are reasons to think that that may be a lower scoring game. Red Sox-Yankees, that was the one I was wrong about last night, pretty much. Although I actually got the football game wrong as well with Texas State. That was a close game, tied down the stretch, and they wound up losing by a field goal at the end. Tough. That would have been a tough beat if you missed the best number on Texas State and got them at a better number. They wound up going off a 3-point favorite last night, by the way, and they wound up losing by 3. At the opener, you could have gotten the +3 and gotten the push on it. But I think if you had Texas State, like, plus the points there, that was a tough loss. Not necessarily a bad beat, but kind of a tough loss there. Last night, I was wrong about Red Sox-Yankees being a high-scoring game. It was not even close to a high-scoring game, although I think that the other baseball games I commented on, I think I was correct on. This game, I kind of want to lean to the Red Sox, even though it's just hopeful thinking that the Red Sox still have any chance at all after losing last night in a tough loss, a 2-1 loss. It's a tough way to lose. big rivalry game, so I figure I will talk about it. Red Sox, Yankees. Yankees down from minus 144 to minus 142. They're very public because they have the better record. Everybody knows they're the better team. 92% of the tickets, 99% of the cash. I'm not sure that's accurate because the money line has crashed on them. Well, not crashed, but it's gone down a little bit. I have to think the Red Sox have the better of the two starting pitchers here with Tanner Houck, who's had a decent season. He made the All-Star game, but as I pointed out, he's a young dude, and he seems to have, since he hit that All-Star break, he seems to have kind of hit a wall, and he hasn't been as good since then. But he does have decent numbers against the Yankees in his fairly young career. And Clark Schmidt, on the other hand, for New York, I think just came back not that long ago, and his career stats against the Red Sox are not as good. I think overall his stats are not as good as Houck's. But is a starting pitching edge slightly in favor of the Red Sox enough to come in and take the Red Sox? I don't want to do it, but you can get them at plus money. I don't really want any part of a very public Yankees team either, coming off of a big win last night, but that was a big game for both teams. And yeah, let's talk about the games that I'm on, I guess. Well, and I also think you have this rematch of a starting pitching matchup that I said I thought was going to be a nice pitching duel like last week. San Diego and San Francisco, Dylan Cease versus Logan Webb. We have a rematch of that same starting pitching matchup from last week, but in the other venue now. It's shifted to San Francisco. That game actually did not stay under, but I think it was because San Francisco, I think, scored a couple runs late in like the top of the ninth inning and wound up winning the game. I would still tend to think this may be a lower scoring game here. Although the market, I don't really see many indicators on the market. The total's at 7. It looks like it's slightly gone up a little bit with a little bit less juice on the under than there was before. But Cease, I mean, he's a really good pitcher. It's just a question of, is he wearing down a little bit because he throws too hard? Doing that for an entire season can wear you down a little bit. Logan Webb doesn't throw as hard, and he throws a lot of pitches and goes a lot of innings. He's one of the guys who throws the most pitches and the most innings in the entirety of Major League Baseball, but that is just kind of his thing. He's kind of used to it, and he doesn't have as hard a fastball as Cease does. So I don't know that he's wearing down as much. And they both have like mediocre numbers against these opposing offenses, like somewhere in the range of like 260 opponent batting averages and stuff like that. So it's not quite something I want to actually do. Let's go to the actual plays here. I'm kind of worried about the market on one of the two. One of the ones I'm going to be taking is the under in Dodgers-Braves. I'm going to take this game. One thing I like about this is that neither of these teams played yesterday. So I'm pretty sure, at least. Did I get that right? I think I did. So neither of these teams played yesterday. So that's one advantage in that can potentially throw off like the rhythm of the hitters slightly, but also it means the bullpens are more rested because the bullpens didn't have to get used yesterday. So that's helpful for an under. It basically means all of the relief pitchers will be available to these teams tonight as far as how they want to use them. So that's one plus for the under here. What we're looking at here in the market, it looks like it's gone down from 9 to 8.5. Wish I got the under 9. I don't see it out there anymore. We're looking at an under 8.5. You can get it in even money, though, plus 100 right now. So the price on that isn't bad. You might be able to get under 9, but you have to pay juice for it. It might be worth it depending on what you actually have to pay for it. I guess I got to consider my options in this one and what I have. But in general, I like the under basically at either one of those prices. The market looks like it is agreeing with it as it's gone down to 8.5. You see 75% of tickets on the over, so a public over here. Of course, the public's going to come in on an over in a Braves-Dodgers game. They like both of these offenses. They know both of these teams can hit. They aren't really familiar with either of these pitchers because they're both young, and they're probably undervaluing these pitchers. So I think that means the odds makers have had to post a total that may be slightly too high here, even though you do have to factor in that both offenses are really good. But we see 85% of the cash coming in on the under, so it does look like the cash discrepancy is on the under. In agreement with my thinking on this. And, of course, you got to look at the starting pitching matchup, which I was just alluding to, where you have Landon Knack is pitching for the Dodgers here, if I can find it on on ESPN's schedule here. And his stats have kind of turned around a little bit. He's not that young. He's 27 years old, although I think this is his first season, so kind of old for a rookie. I don't know if he was dealing with injuries as far as coming up or whatever, but I don't think that he was just held back because they don't think he's like a good pitcher, because sometimes you'll see guys enter the major leagues later in their life just because teams kind of want to bring them up because they need to fill like a position or whatever. I don't think that's the case with Knack. I do think that they think this guy is decent, even though he is 27 and this is his rookie season. He's got his ERA down to 3 on the season, which is pretty good, and a whip of .96 under 1. That tells me he's been pitching decently, and I thought he had like kind of a rough start to when he came up, but I actually might be mistaken. It doesn't look like he was really doing that bad, except for the walks, kind of. But he's gotten that in check. 52-13 strikeout walk ratio isn't bad. 10 home runs allowed is a bit high, so you don't like to see that. But he's only got 39 hits in 54 innings, so he has not been very easily hittable. So I like to see that. The strikeout rate is decent. The strikeout walk rate isn't that bad, and the hit rate is definitely low. You can see he doesn't go that deep into a lot of these starts, though. He's had maybe too many starts for my liking where he hasn't reached the 5-inning mark. But then you could also say, well, a lot of those were against good offenses. Philly, Arizona, Milwaukee. And then in his most recent start, looking pretty good. So after that Milwaukee start, maybe that start got cut short or something. That was in mid-August. So it looks like he's had a couple of gaps in his pitching resume. It looks like when he came up, he had a little bit of a gap in early May, then another gap and came back up and started pitching again. He must have been up and down between the minors. Came back again in June, pitched for a while, and then stopped after mid-August again. And now they've given him another break, it looks like. It looks like maybe they gave him a break in late July, too. He made that one start. So does that mean his schedule is thrown off? I don't know, because he is on like a regular pitching schedule now because they brought him back and he pitched against Cleveland when they just faced Cleveland last Friday. So he's on that regular schedule where he pitched exactly a week ago. And he did well against Cleveland. 6 innings pitched. They let him throw 91 pitches. So that shows you that they're allowing him to throw a lot of pitches. They're not really leashing him at this point. He had an 8-1 strikeout walk ratio in that one. Only allowed 2 earned runs against a pretty good Cleveland offense. So that tells me that he does have decent stuff, and they are letting him pitch. So I like all of that. And then you got him in his career against Atlanta. Atlanta has effectively never seen him before, and that's going to be the case on both sides of this matchup, which you know me, when you got these rookie pitchers getting involved, I think they have a little bit of an advantage against the hitters. When the hitters have never seen them before, the hitters have to figure them out, and it takes a little while. It takes a couple of times facing a new starter if they have good stuff to kind of figure them out as a hitter a lot of times. So the pitcher tends to have a little bit of an added edge because of that, and we have that going for both sides of this pitching matchup. Only Jorge Soler, I don't know how you pronounce him, Solar Panel, Soleil. He's the only hitter that's ever seen Knack before on the Braves. Does have 6 at-bats against him somehow, whereas nobody else has any. He's 1 for 6 off him with 2 strikeouts and no walks. Not a whole lot you can take away from this other than the fact that Knack has never been seen before by the rest of the Braves hitters. So when you have good lineups like the Braves and the Dodgers here, the fact that these starting pitchers have never been seen before by the opposing hitters also helps mitigate how good those offenses are. So I like that as well. And then Spencer Schwellenbach is on the other side of this match. I mean, I've been talking about him. He is also a rookie for Atlanta here. 3.78 ERA, 1.12 whip on the season. I keep talking about him because he's been pitching well this season. His strikeout walk ratio is insane, 107-19. That's pretty good. 12 home runs allowed, not that bad either because he's thrown 97 2/3 innings pitched. That's not bad. Only 90 hits allowed. So he has a pretty nice high strikeout rate, a low walk rate, hasn't allowed a lot of hits, and he's been pretty consistent. He had that one bad start, as I mentioned, when I've talked about him in the past against Boston. And then other than that, up through until he faced St. Louis in July. So he started the season in late May, and then up through that start in St. Louis, the Red Sox and St. Louis, both on the road, were the only 2 starts where he allowed more than 3 earned runs, all the way up to never mind. I'm not right. He allowed 4 earned runs against St. Louis and then Pittsburgh and then again against St. Louis. So never mind. But okay, we could say he allowed 4 or fewer earned runs in every start, starting in late May. And actually, that's continued to be the case this whole time. If you exclude that Red Sox start, he still has not allowed more than 4 earned runs in any start. Going back to that St. Louis one on July 21st, he has not allowed more than 3 earned runs in any start since then. Although you do see, it looks like he is wearing down a little bit. Maybe I'd be a little bit worried about that because he does throw hard. But the fact that he started the season in late May, he has not thrown a full season, so I'm not as worried about that. I don't know. But I just think he faced like a tough stretch here where he had to face Philadelphia. He pitched really well in that game, and then he had to face Minnesota right after that. And he just was inefficient with his pitches in that one, but he still didn't even allow any runs. Had 8 strikeouts in that one, so that wasn't that bad of a start, really. 3 walks wasn't that great, but you would have liked him to see him be more efficient with his pitches, but he still held Minnesota in check. Then he gave up 2 earned runs facing Philadelphia again, which is a tough spot to be in. You have to go on the road to face a Philadelphia offense who's a good offense, who just saw you and was now more familiar with you. So that's not easy for them to do, for Schwellenbach to do. I mean, he still didn't pitch that badly, although his strikeout rate was low. He did only go 5 2/3. So that still wasn't that bad a start. And then against Toronto, 3-0 strikeout walk ratio. He only went 5 innings in the game. He allowed 10 hits, which isn't good, but I consider that to be more of an outlier because you can see in the rest of his starts he wasn't allowing that many hits. But his defense also didn't help him out as he allowed 3 unearned runs in that one. Out of the 6 runs he allowed, 3 of them were unearned. So when I was saying the runs he was allowed, I was specifically talking about earned runs. If you want to keep that track record in check there. His fielding behind him let him down. That was against a Toronto team that has a mediocre offense, I would say. But I kind of expect him to be in kind of a bounce-back mode here, hopefully. And then, of course, like I said, up against the Dodgers. The Dodgers have never seen Schwellenbach before. So, again, on this side of it, you have a young pitcher who the hitters have never seen before. So, like I already went over, that tends to be an advantage to that young pitcher. So, that's where I'm going to go on that one. I'm going to take the under in the Dodgers and Cubs game. Or Dodgers-Atlanta, excuse me. Dodgers did just play the Cubs, and I played a couple of games in that series, I think. Or I at least had a lean on one of the games. I think I played one game in that series and won on an over in the middle of that series. The other game I am going to play, I was Freudian slipping maybe. I am going to lay a road price with the Chicago Cubs, even though I don't like what I've seen in the shift in the market here. I did see them have the cash percentage on them, and now it looks like it has shifted so that it's not on them anymore. Of course, you know the Cubs are going to be public as they have the better record over a bad Colorado team. The Cubs are up from -128 to -138 on the money line, though. 87% of the tickets on them and only 61% of the cash now. I don't love that. So when I was looking to make this play, it was the cash discrepancy was on the Cubs more than it is here, and maybe it'll shift back in that direction because the money line has moved up on them, so I think there is some reason for that other than the fact that the public is coming in on this, because I don't know if the public's really going to come in that heavily on a game involving the Colorado Rockies. I mean, the Rockies are an eliminated team. The Cubs, of course, are not technically eliminated, so I think that lends itself to some motivation. I think Colorado, you can kind of question their motivation as an eliminated team. Do they want to play spoiler against a Cubs team that isn't a division rival? And I don't know. I don't know that that's going to motivate them that much, really. Cubs, on the other hand, have motivation at the very least because they're still fighting to get a wild card spot, although they're 5 games back, I think, so the hope isn't there that much. But I do think that they'll still be showing up to a game like this, and I think they might have reason to do so, even though I might be a little bit worried that the Cubs might be in a little bit of a letdown spot or hangover spot because they did just face the Dodgers, but they were off yesterday. So the Cubs do have a little bit of an added rest edge here because they didn't play yesterday, getting that rest in between the Dodgers series and this series, having to go into elevation. And you could maybe call it a letdown because they won the series against the Dodgers, and that was on the heels of a Yankees series. So normally I would say this is a letdown spot for the Cubs, but when you're fighting to get a wild card and there aren't many games left, I think you're still going to be showing up to games, man, especially games that are winnable. So I don't really expect them to be in that much of a hangover spot, and they did lose the last game against the Dodgers, so having that day off might help kind of put them in the right mindset again and focus on this, so I like that, and that also helps their bullpen rest as well. Whereas Colorado played yesterday. So Colorado's in a bad situational spot at the very least. So that was one thing that caught my eye. They played yesterday at Detroit, and they're returning home from a road trip that took them out to Atlanta, Milwaukee, and Detroit. So they had a long road trip going all the way back to September 3rd. Returning home 10 days later with no time off. Although I do say that when a team doesn't have any days off, it actually is less bad of a return home spot. When you have the day off, it actually makes the return home spot worse because you kind of start getting into that mindset where, I'm back home, I can start doing things at home again. But it is still a negative. It is still a return home spot for the Rockies. So both teams are having to come back into elevation here. The Rockies are, of course, used to playing in elevation, but still, it is a return home spot, which is typically a negative spot in the schedule. And they played yesterday, whereas the Cubs did not. So you have an extra little bit of a rest edge there for the Cubs. And the Rockies used multiple relievers here, including, I believe, their closer, even though his ERA is bad. They used some of their relievers last night, 4 relief pitchers, while the Cubs didn't have to use any of their bullpen at all. And their hitters didn't have to play, so the Cubs got rest. So I think that puts an edge on the Cubs as well. Colorado's also in a spot that is typically a bad spot for the return home team, where they're not only the returning home team, but they're a bad enough team that they're a home underdog. And that tends to be a bad spot for the return home team. The return home team is an underdog. It tends to be a worse spot than the typical return home spot. When the team is an underdog, because it just means they're not a very good team, so that tends to kind of just exacerbate the return home spot because they're not really a good team, so the lapse in focus tends to be a little bit greater there. So the Cubs have all of that going against them. So I like all of that. And then we can look at the starting pitching matchup here, where I do think the starting pitching matchup is a little bit questionable as far as which of these pitchers is better. Javier Assad has the better ERA. It's definitely low, 3.14. But I don't trust him necessarily because he has a 1.34 ERA. Or whip, excuse me. He is pitching for the Cubs here. He is, oh man, my nose is running so bad right now. Allergies and whatever. It's not good. Assad walks too many people, man. That's his problem. 111 to 56 strikeout walk ratio. He's not a strikeout guy. He's kind of a junk pitcher, but he doesn't have his control under control. So the 56 walks is the glaring bad stat that he has. He's only allowed 121 hits in 131 2/3 innings pitched, so those stats are fine. He's not that easy to hit, but his walk number is bad. And recently, it hasn't been any better, really. He did have a 3.16 ERA, so he's just kind of continuing to pitch the way he usually does in the month of August, but he had a 20 to 11 strikeout walk ratio, and he did allow more hits than innings pitched, 32 and 31 1/3, so that's not that great either. So he was putting a lot of men on base and kind of just getting away with it. But that is kind of what he does. I mean, it does worry me that he puts too many men on base. And then he continued doing that against the Yankees in his most recent start. Went 5 2/3 in that one. Only allowed 1 earned run and 3 hits, but he walked 3 guys in that one. But still, he's a guy who limits the damage at the very least. So you do like to see that. He's only allowed 4 or more earned runs in, I believe, 3 of his starts all season. And he's not a rookie at this point either. He's 27 years old, so he's been around. He's posted similar stats in the previous years. Somehow he just consistently does this. I don't get it. I don't like to see whips that are that high. Last year it was a bit lower, so easier to tolerate. He's got to stop walking, guys. But Colorado's offense is not very good, and he has done well against them in a 39 at-bat sample size over their careers. He's held them, even though he has a 12.5 strikeout walk ratio, that's a lot of strikeouts. It is too many walks for sure, but he's held them to a 179 batting average and 529 OPS. So Colorado's hitters who have seen him do have weak offensive stats against him. So I think that's a good thing in favor of Assad. He did face them once earlier this year, and he did well against them. That was actually his opening start to the year. He went 6 innings at home against them and shut them out for 6 innings. So does that mean Colorado's going to be a little bit more familiar with him? Sure. But, I mean, they haven't faced him for a long time, since April 2nd, so it's not recent familiarity. So I don't know if I'm too concerned about that, really. And his overall stats are decent against them, which do include that start, of course. He does have one start in Coors Field ever, so you do have to worry about the high elevation. His start wasn't good. I think he only went 4 innings in that start and allowed 4 runs or something like that, so it's a small sample size, so I don't know how much you can really take away from that, but he does have one career start at Coors, and it wasn't a good start. But I think some of these hitters have changed since then on Colorado's team. I don't know, so I don't know if there's that much that we can really take away from that, although now that he has pitched there once, maybe he'll at least be a little bit more used to that environment as well. But if Assad also gets knocked out and it becomes a game where you're relying on the bullpens, this is why I like the full game in this one. Not only because if you're laying a run line in this one, which is what I'm doing, as you can see here, minus 1.5 runs at plus 106, because the Cubs are up in the minus 140 something range. I don't mind if you want to take the money line there as well, but the run line, you get it down to a cheaper price. So as far as the spot is concerned, I do like that a little bit better. But if this becomes a bullpen game, I do think the Cubs have the bullpen edge just because Colorado's bullpen, I think, is pretty lousy, and they had to use half of their bullpen yesterday, or, well, 4 relief pitchers at least, while the Cubs were resting yesterday. So full game, I do think makes sense in a spot like this. So I think the Cubs do have the edge in the bullpen and in their hitting, and I think that edge is questionable at best in the starting pitching matchup. So that definitely indicates that you should be going full game on this. And you could lay the minus 140 something run line if you really want to on the Cubs. I don't know. I prefer the run line when you can get it at a cheaper price like this, or you could split half on the run line, half on the money line if you want to. Half of your bet on each, which kind of makes it a -1 run line play. Or if you want to get like a price that's in between where the run line is and where the money line is, you could lay -1 run line on the Cubs and probably get it in like a -120 something range. And then if they win by 1, it'll push. So any of those options are available to you if you have multiple books available to you. Austin Gombers on the other side. He is not Colorado's worst pitcher, really. He's not that bad. He's got a 4.5 ERA and 1.26 whip, which isn't that bad. But I do think we may have a situation where he may be a little bit distracted. He was on paternity leave because he just had a baby, or I guess his wife did. Congratulations to them, to the Gombers. You could think of that both ways, maybe. Like maybe that'll pump him up and he'll be excited as a new father to play. Or you could say that maybe that's just going to add to the return home distractions. I mean, he's returning home and he just had a baby. So that could actually add to the distractions more than it might like pump him up. I mean, you're talking about an eliminated Colorado team. So maybe he won't totally be focused. He is basically pitching on normal rest almost still, though. He pitched 8 days ago. So his start, I don't think got bumped back by that much. So I don't think that his schedule is really going to be thrown off that much. But what he just did in his last start was one of his best starts of his career. He went 8 innings, 1 earned run allowed against the Atlanta Braves on the road, only allowed 5 hits, 6.0 strikeout walk ratio, which you could take this 2 ways. I mean, you could say he's in good recent form, which, true. I mean, he had a 24-9 strikeout walk ratio in the month of August, but a 4.37 ERA. So he was still giving up some runs over that time span. And then continuing to pitch well, strikeout walk ratio-wise, and not allowing many runs in that game against Atlanta. You could say he's in good recent form, but you could also say he might be gassed, man. So he has that new fatherhood situation on his mind there, but also he's made 3 like kind of big starts in a row against the Yankees, Baltimore, and then Atlanta. Big start. And when it's a Colorado team that doesn't really have much reason to play for here, they don't have that much to play for here, he could be in a little bit of a letdown spot coming off a bunch of big starts in a row there. So I would worry about him a little bit for that reason. And his stats over the course of the season, not bad. 108 to 36 strikeout walk ratio. He doesn't strike a lot of guys out at all. That's in 152 innings. 156 hits allowed, so he allows too many hits. He allows too many home runs at 27. So it seems like his style doesn't suit Coors Field that well because he's not keeping the home runs down, really. It is a home run park. So you do expect a Colorado starter to have given up more home runs, but they tried to build their team getting some guys that, you know, can hit in that elevation and pitch in that elevation, and his home run number doesn't really indicate that he does that well there. So that's not great either. And then you can look at his batter versus pitcher stats, which I do think, again, you have to type it in on ESPN. Just because he went on paternity leave and has start pushed back slightly, that means you have to type it in to go see it. But his stats against these Cubs hitters, it's a small sample size of 23, but they have not been good. I mean, he's allowed 7 extra base hits, including 2 home runs, 11 RBIs, and that limited a sample size is crazy, dude. And it's evenly spread out across these hitters, too, and a 9.6 strikeout walk ratio. So even though it's a small sample size of 23, the Cubs hitters have a 435 average and 1,446 OPS off him. So that does indicate to me that the starting pitching edge should go to Assad because his numbers against Colorado specifically are better than Gombers are against the Cubs specifically, quite significantly. Just that Assad pitching in Coors does worry me a little bit, and the Gombers have been pitching well recently. But all those other factors here lead me to believe that fading Gomber, I think, is the right move here. So all of that to be considered there, but the play is on the Chicago Cubs on the run line here, -1.5, and you can get it at plus money, plus 106 I saw out there. So those two plays again for today, both in baseball. Dodgers, Braves, under 8.5 plus 100, or if you can find a under 9, laying the -120 might be a little bit much, but if you can lay -115 to do that, I kind of like that. And then Chicago Cubs -1.5 run line plus 106, or like I said, if you want to play money line or split the bet some way between run line and money line, or play a -1 run line. I think all of those options are fine as well. And then we do have college football today. We do not have NFL today, as NFL is not playing a Friday night game. They did have a special Brazil Friday night game, which I won on the Philadelphia Eagles last week, but it's not going to be an every week thing. So we just have college football. We do have 2 FBS games tonight. One is UNLV, Kansas. Kansas is up from 8 to 9.5 with 56% of tickets and 57% of the cash. So it looks like the money is coming in slightly on the Kansas side. I don't know. I mean, I guess I would lean with what the market is telling me. I don't have a strong read on this one. I like the other game better than this one. Both Kansas teams playing today, by the way. This is a rematch of the Guaranteed Rate Bowl between UNLV and Kansas. But I actually think that both starting quarterbacks are different from what they were in that game, though. Kansas, I think they had like a quarterback injury, and it was like questionable which quarterback they were even going to have in there. I forget what they wound up even doing. They wound up winning that bowl game. And I think actually covered, or they landed like right around where the number was, because the number was moving so much. They were like a double-digit favorite. Kansas won the bowl game and kind of got that monkey off their back because they hadn't won a bowl in a while. So does that mean UNLV is going to have revenge on their man? I don't know, because they've had some turnover as well. Their quarterback who played in that game isn't there anymore. So I don't know, but UNLV maybe as a program, they remember that they lost that bowl game to Kansas not that long ago. But Kansas is the better team, and Kansas was a -12, -13 favorite in that one, and they're only -9 here. But, of course, like I said, both quarterbacks are different, so you don't really expect the line to be exactly what it was in that game. But that game was also a neutral site game, and I'm pretty sure this game is a home game for Kansas. So is Kansas getting a little bit shortchanged here on the line? Maybe they are, based on all of that, because they are at home for this one. So the line being that different from that game, maybe. And Kansas is in a mode where they just got knocked out of the top 25 rankings. I talked about that last week. They went to Illinois, but I liked Illinois in that one. That was a tough spot for Kansas. So you might expect Kansas maybe angrier because of that and may bounce back from this. Or you could also argue that, well, this game is sandwiched between a Big Ten game and a Big 12 game here against West Virginia next week. So I don't know. Although this is not really their home opener, because they did play a home game against a bad FCS team in Lindenwood, but maybe they'll be pumped up because this is kind of their FBS home opener. I don't know. So I could see the scheduling spot going both ways for Kansas in that one. So it's tough to actually read. You could say that this is a lesser game sandwiched between two bigger games, but you could also say that they're going to still be focused on it because it is their first, actual kind of big home game. And I mean, at least it's against an FBS team. And they might be angry off of losing as a road favorite. I don't know. And UNLV, maybe they look too good after putting up 72 against Utah Tech, but that's an FCS team that doesn't have much going for it, so I don't know. The fact that UNLV is 2-0, I wouldn't take that much away from that. They're obviously the worst team here, but because they put up 72 last week, maybe that means that also Kansas is going to be getting a little bit of value on the number just because UNLV looked better than they did last week. So I would lean with the market slightly to Kansas, but not a strong lean. The other game I like better, I lean to Kansas State in this one, sitting at -7. If you can get that -7 and not even have to lay the hook, that seems like a decent play to me. And the cash discrepancy is on that side. 56% of the cash on Kansas State. Excuse me, I don't know if I said Kansas again. K-State. 50% of the tickets evenly split between Arizona and Kansas State. This being week 3, there are not a lot of matchups between two ranked teams, and this is one of two, actually, and they get a primetime Friday night game. Arizona, number 20, against number 14. Kansas State is the only ranked matchup besides the BC-Missouri one, which ridiculous. I mean, this one is more of an actual ranked matchup between two pretty good teams here, but Kansas State, the odds makers are telling you that Kansas State is the better team, is their favorite at home, and the cash discrepancy, like I said, is actually laying the points with Kansas State. I do like that as a spot here, man. As a side, I like the spot. K-State's coming off They beat an FCS team. No one cares about that. And then they went on the road. Kind of a tough environment, though, to go on the road to Tulane, a first true road game of the season, a place that's not familiar to you, really. And they almost screwed up. They almost lost to Tulane. I think Tulane was actually beating them for a while in this game. Yeah, they were. And then K-State was able to get out of there with the win. But I see that as an escape for K-State. They were a road favorite of like almost 10 points in that game. I think 9.5. So I think that might shock them into a little bit of focus here. And this is going to be their FBS home opener as well. And this is a conference game. And Arizona is new to the Big 12. So I think that's going to motivate both teams here. But K-State, they're the better team. And Arizona's going into unfamiliar territory because they're not used to playing in these Big 12 stadiums. So I think that's one advantage to the Big 12 team against the newcomer to the Big 12. Playing at home there, you get a little bit of an extra edge there because that newcomer isn't familiar with your place. But also, Kansas State's going to want to like defend their home turf, basically. They don't want this new guy in their conference to show them up on their home turf. So I think that is also a reason to lean to the Kansas State side here. I think they will be motivated to not let that new guy come in and do something to them on their home field. That plus they're coming off a near loss that they shouldn't have. It was a scare, basically, a game that they should not have had that much difficulty with against Tulane. So I think we're going to see a focused K-State team here in this one. You should see a focused Arizona team as well. It's just a matter of, are they actually the better team? I don't think they are because the odds makers are obviously telling you they're not. But Arizona, they're coming off a performance that wasn't very good against Northern Arizona as well, an FCS team that's not even very good, only put up 22 against them. So I think Arizona might have been looking ahead to this game too, so that was a bad performance too that might kind of refocus them as well coming into this. So I do expect focus from the Arizona side as well. I just think that K-State is in the somewhat better spot and has reason to be a little bit more focused in this one. But Arizona is coming off an ugly performance against Northern Arizona as well, which it was a game they should have much more easily handled. So they also don't look as good coming into this one. And both games are so low scoring that I actually like the over in this one as well, because last week both teams didn't look good, but this total has really skyrocketed from 56.5 to 61.5. 90% of the tickets on the over because public prime time, I guess, but 81% of the cash on the over. So the over is very public, but I agree with it, but I wouldn't want to take the worst price on the over there. But because both teams had really bad offensive performances, Kansas State did get up into the 30s, but both teams didn't really do that well offensively against teams that they probably should have scored more easily against. So I lean to the over in that one as well, but the better numbers are certainly gone. So that's going to do it for me, man. Chicago Cubs -1.5 on the run line in baseball, and LA Dodgers, Atlanta under 8.5 in baseball. Those are the two plays. Have a good one. Let's start the weekend right. I'll come out with my college football video maybe tonight. I do believe I have my plays in order for that. So hopefully the lines don't change that much between now and when I get that video out. Have a good one. Peace.